Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Arena Talks. Today we will talk about Stranger Things. Stranger Things is an American science fiction horror drama television series created by the Duffer brothers, who also serve as showrunners and as executive producers, along with Sean Levy and Dan Cohen. Produced by Monkey Massacre Production and Levy's 21 Labs Entertainment. Set in the 1980s, the series centers around the residents of the fictional small town of Hawkins, Indiana, as they are plagued by a hostile alternate dimension known as the Upside Down. After a nearby human experimentation facility opens a gateway between the Upside Down and the normal world, it starts an ensemble cast including Winona Ryder, David Harbour, Finn Wolfhard, Millie Bobby Brown, Gaten Matarazzo, Caleb McLaughlin, Natalia Dyer, Charlie Heaton, Cara Bueno, Matthew Morden, Noah Schnapp, Sadie Sink, Joey Carey, Darcy Montgomery, Sean Austin, Paul Reiser, Maya Hawke, Priya Ferguson, and Brett Gelman. When I saw the first season of Stranger Things, it was really strange and somewhat creepy. And maybe you know what, I don't really like thriller or horror, but somehow it triggered me, this series, and I don't know, it's just, I stopped watching it, and I was really curious about, okay, how does the story evolve, and what about the characters, etc. And, you know, it's a great series because it's something with, you get something with, almost every genre. And I have never heard of the term science fiction horror drama. And, well, I'm really a little bit new to this because normally I wouldn't watch things like this series. And so, but like I said, how more I watched it, how more I wanted to know how it's finished and how the story goes. So, let's talk about of the important characters. What I really like, by the way, the characters are very good written. And I really liked how they developed, but also like in a romantic way, but also in, you know, this is typical a series. I don't want to say it's feel good series, but it is more like for example in Ghostbusters Afterlife, those children nerds that really becoming heroes, and you can see that in this series as well. The children are mostly here the heroes and the brave ones, and of course they have gonna be our eyelash of the adults, etc. And they just do what they do, and I really liked it. And I think also the game D&D is what they're playing. It's gonna have a new rebound of playing it, because of course I knew the game, but I never have played it. I do have interest in it, but I never played it, and I have for now, I don't know, it's just never come to it, or I don't have friends who are actually really playing it, so that's why I never played it. And the funny thing is, I'm at the moment I'm rewatching Riverdale for the next episode, and they have a similar game as D&D that they are playing. So it's really nice to see how that that there are games like that. So let's start with one of the main characters, 11, or Jane Eyre, or later, of course, Jane Hopper. Well, she was born with a special psychogenic abilities. Jane's mother, Terry, was experimented upon in the controversial government program known as MKUltra, which by accident or by Dr. Martin Brenner, who I really don't like, is designed to affect Jane in the womb. Upon her birth, Jane was immediately kidnapped by Dr. Brenner and brought to Hawkins National Laboratory. Jane was redesigned 11, being the 11th of Brenner's series of children test subjects. Throughout her childhood, Brenner tested 11 and the others' abilities at the lab, all the while denying her access to the outside world. On September 8, 1979, a mysterious Hawkins lab orderly showed 11 that Brenner had implanted a strange device in her neck and tricked her into removing it with her power. 11 soon realized that the orderly was in fact Henry Creel, or one, the lab's original psychoclinic test subject. In a fit of rage, Henry, his power restored from having the implant removed, brutally murdered the other test subjects and attempted to sway 11 to his course. However, 11 refused and overpowered him, sending him through a temporary gate to another dimension. Following the incident, 11 fell into a coma and became somewhat amnestic, with her powers blunted. 4 years later, on November the 6th, 1983, Brenner pushed 11 to make contact with a creature from the alternate dimension, accidentally opening a second gateway to the lab. Amongst the chaos, 11 escaped the lab through a drain pipe. She was soon found by Mike, Lucas, and Dustin upon discovering her abilities. Mike believed that she could help find Will, their missing friend. During their time together, she and Mike formed a strong bond and quickly grew to like each other. In an attempt to protect her friends, 11 eventually destroyed the monster she had unleashed in a showdown at Hawkins Middle School, mysteriously vanishing in the process. Despite her apparent demise, 11 had survived and secretly began living with Jim Hopper at his grandfather's old cabin. Frustrated from being separated from her friends, 11 decided to defy Hopper's orders and went on a journey on self-discovery, uncovering her past. Realizing she could not leave her friends behind, she returned to Hawkins, reuniting with her allies to help them neutralize yet another supernatural threat dubbed the Mind Player. 11 was then taken in by Hopper as his adopted daughter, her illegal name now Jane Hopper. In December, she attended the Snowball school dance with Mike. By the summer of 1985, 11 had struck up a friendship with Max, with her romantic relationship with Mike continuing to blossom. Upon learning that the Mind Player had returned to wreak havoc in Hawkins, she and her friends began efforts to defeat it. During their fight against the possessed Billy, the Flayer, and the Mind Player's various proxy forms, 11 suffered a traumatic injury and lost access to her powers. Following Hopper's appeared dead, 11 was taken in by the Byers family and were all relocated to Lenora Hills, California, under the supervision of Dr. Sam Owens. By the spring of 1986, 11 was still struggling to adapt to her new life and new school in Lenora, being visually bullied by classmates. She planned to spend spring break with Mike, who was traveling to California to be with her. But these plans were disrupted when Dr. Owens regretfully informed her of a new evil threatening Hawkins. Eleven was persuaded by both Dr. Owens and Dr. Brenner to partake in a new experimental scheme to restore and even boost her abilities. As part of the process, Eleven re-experimented her repressed memories as a 7-year-old at Hawkins' lab. She remembered Henry Creels was responsible for the massacre of her fellow test subjects on September 8, 1979, and that she had found and banished Henry to the Upside Down on that same day. The scheme was a success in restoring Elle's abilities, but was interrupted by an attack by the U.S. military, orchestrated by the distrustful Lieutenant Commander Colonel Sullivan, which I hate. I really hate that part of this series, but okay. Despite the military's best efforts to assassinate 11, she quickly overpowered them and escaped with the aid of Mike, Will, Jonathan, and Argyle. 11 then attempted to assist her old friends in Hawkins via psychic projection, but could not prevent Vecna's plan to further the Upside Down Inquisition. I like the character of Jane or / 11, not only because she is a great and beautiful actress, but I can identify a little bit myself with her. Not because I have powers like her, but more like I have strong spiritual gifts, and I know how it is like, how people will bully you or are scared of you, of what you are and what you can do, and that is not easy at times. She's very lucky she has friends who believes in her and loves her like this. Will was a shy, artistic boy from Hawkins, Indiana, who loved to play Dungeons and Dragons with his 3 best friends, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin. However, Will's life will turn upside down on November 6, 1983. While cycling home from his friend's latest D&D campaign, Will crossed paths with a humanoid predator healing from an alternate dimension. Will tries his best to escape, but the creature cornered him, transporting him to his home dimension. For a week, Will evaded the creature while his family and friends desperately searched for him. He found a way to communicate with his mother Joyce across dimensions by manipulating electricity. Will was eventually captured by the creature and taken to the other dimensions version of the public library, where he was strung up and attached to a mysterious alien vine. Joyce and the local chief of police, Jim Hopper, traveled into the alternate dimension via an interdimensional gateway at Hawkins Natural Library, and finally managed to locate Will. He was taken to a hospital to recover, where he reunited with his family and friends. Although Will reunited to his old life in Hawkins, his time in what his friends called the Upside Down had left a mark on his psyche. He began to experience vision of the 2 worlds flickering in and out of existence. By the fall of 1984, Joyce had started taking Will to Hawkins' lab to be examined by Dr. Sam Owens, who dismissed Will's visions as a consequence of trauma. However, his visions proved to be of a much stranger and more sinister nature. Will began to see a gigantic spider-like creature looming in the skies of the Upside Down, and despite his best efforts to resist, became possessed by the entity. The creature, which Will's friends dubbed the Mind Player, exploited its connection to Will to manipulate Owens and the scientists at Hawkins' lab, resulting in many deaths and casualties at the facility. With the help of Joyce, Jonathan, and Mike's sister, Nancy, the portion of the creature that inhabited Will was driven out of his body, disappearing into the night. Additionally, 11 and escaped child test subject from Hawkins' lab with psychokinetic abilities. And a friend to Mike, Lucas, and Dustin used her powers to seal the interdimensional gateway. This cut off the Mind Player's psychic link, and for a time ended the Upside Down insurrection into Hawkins. A month later, a recovered Will attended the Snowball at Hawkins Middle School with his friends. By the summer of 1985, many members of the party were in romantic relationships. Mike had become involved with 11, Lucas with Maxfield, and Dustin with a girl from Utah that he met at summer camp. Will was the only member of the party to not be in a romantic relationship, and with the attention of his friends in short supply, he struggled to feel accepted or valued. He attempted to organize a new Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but grew upset and angry when he saw his friends were clearly losing interest. To make matters worse, Will sensed that the Mind Player's presence still lingered in Hawkins, and discovered that Max's stepbrother, Billy, was being used as its new puppet. Putting his feelings behind him, he joined his friends in once again fighting the Mind Player. 3 months later, Will tearfully said goodbye to his friends before he and his family moved out of Hawkins, taking 11 with them. Dr. Owens relocated the Byers and 11 to Lenora Hills, California. 11 noticed that Will had been acting weird and wondered if he had a crush on somebody. Will stood by 11's side at their new school, where she endured frequent bullying by Angela and her friends. Mike flew out to Lenora to spend spring break with 11 and Will, but during his visit, 11 got involved in a minor incident involving Angela and the local roller skating ring. 11 ultimately got taken away by police, but later, two mysterious agents arrived at the Byers' house to protect and supervise Will, Jonathan, and Mike. The house would later be attacked by the military. One of the agents was wounded in the attack, telling the boys to find Nina before succumbing to his wounds. The three set out on a road trip to find 11, with Jonathan's friend Argyle joining them. During the trip, Will indirectly revealed his romantic feelings for Mike, to which Mike remained oblivious. After finding 11 in the Nevada desert, the four helped 11 by creating a makeshift sensory deprivation tank in the kitchen of a nearby pizza restaurant. This allowed her to use psychic projection to fight Vecna, a new surface evil from the upside down. And as we know, Vecna is entirely 01 or Henry. 2 days later, the group returned to Hawkins and were shocked by the scale of destruction inflicted by the recent earthquake. Upon his return to Hawkins, Will realized his psychic connection created back in 1984 was not to the Mind Flyer but Vecna. He weirdly told Mike that he still sensed Vecna's presence, and that for the horrors of the Upside Down to end, Vecna needed die. Wills is a character that is like 11. The connection between the normal and the Upside Down world. I noticed that he is the most emotional character of the gang, if I can call them like that. He is very sensitive, and I think that is why he has been chosen by the monster to become its spy. Also, when you are emotional, the shadow monster and Vecna will get to you more easily. When Mike's best friend Will Byers mysteriously went missing, he and his friends Lucas and Dustin make it their mission to find him. However, while searching for Will, they stumbled upon an escaped girl named 11 instead. Mike soon discovered that she knew something about Will's disappearance, and enlisted her to help finding him. During their time together, Mike and 11 formed a strong bond and quickly grew to like each other. Once Will was found, Mike was happy that he had returned home safely. However, he was greatly devastated by 11's sacrifice to defeat the Demogorgon. Still devastated by 11's disappearance 1 year later, Mike called for her every night while also assisting Will with the new supernatural issues. Eventually he reunited with 11. He along with his friend and Steve then worked on burning the sprawling network of another interdimensional threat, using it as a distraction for 11 to close the gate for good. Mike later attended the snowball dance with 11, which he previously promised her. Mike and Elle were seemingly inseparable until the summer of 1985, when their relationship faced new trials and tribulations. In an attempt to establish boundaries, Elle's disgruntled adoptive father, Chief Hopper, scared of Mike and jeopardized the teen's relationship. Will also express his frustrations with how Mike and Lucas' relationships had disrupted the dynamic in the friend group. Their attention would turn to more pressing concerns. However, when Will alerted them to the presence of the Mind Flayer, after Mac's stepbrother, Billy Hargrove, was noted to be acting unusually, they learned Billy and various Hawkins residents had become possessed by the Mind Flayer and began efforts to defeat it. 3 months later, Mike and his friends had to bid farewell to 11 and the Byers, who were moving out of Hawkins. Before leaving, Mike and 11 made plans to visit each other at Thanksgiving and reaffirmed their love for each other. By the spring of 1986, Mike was a dedicated member of the Hellflyer Club, along with Dustin and Lucas. He headed to Lenora Hills, California to spend spring break with 11. She had sent Mike letters telling him that she had adapted well to California. However, upon his arrival, Mike realized that 11 was struggling more than she let on. When Dr. Owens whisked Elle away to work on regaining her power, Mike joined Will, Jonathan, and Argyle in searching for her, all the while evading Lieutenant Colonel Jack Sullivan and his forces, who held 11 responsible for a murder spree in Hawkins. With help from Dustin's girlfriend Susie Bingham, they tracked down 11 at a secret facility in Nevada, narrowly escaped Colonel Sullivan's forces. Later, Mike and the others helped 11 fight Vecna from afar by creating a makeshift sensory deprivating tank, allowing her to psychically project her consciousness to Hawkins. During Al's mind battle with the enemy, Mike made it clear to her that he loved her, giving her the strength to momentarily overpower and defeat Vecna. 2 days later, the group traveled to Hawkins and was shocked by the scale of destruction inflicted by the recent earthquake. Upon their return, Will realized his psychic connection created back in 1984 was not to the Mind Flayer but Vecna. He wearily told Mike that he still sensed Vecna's presence, and that for the horrors of the Upside Down to end, Vecna needed to die. Mike is the only one who keeps Al grounded. He is the only one who is the one that can reach Al when everything is hopeless. Because of him, situation can turn around like when Vecna had prisoned 11. To me, Mike is like the other really the definition of a nerd. What's really nice to see is that those nerds are the heroes of this series. Dustin. Dustin was somewhat of a typical nerd and had a rare genetic disorder that prevented his teeth from developing properly, making him the prime target for bullies. He arrived at Hawkins Middle School in the 4th grade, growing a strong bond with Mike, Lucas, and Will, and becoming best friends. When Will mysteriously went missing, Dustin, Lucas, and Mike made it their mission to find him. However, while searching for Will, they stumbled upon a mysterious girl named 11 instead. After learning 11 possessed special psycho-clinic abilities, Mike believed she could aid to quest to find Will. To Lucas was suspicion of 11's behavior and action, Dustin acted as a mediator between the two, keeping them focused on the task at hand. Dustin and his friends deduced that Will was lost in an alternative dimension, one that could be accessed via a gate at Hawkins' lab. Though the group were unable to personally retrieve Will, Dustin and his friends later faced off against the creature that had adopted him, with 11 seemingly sacrificing her life to defeat the Demogorgon. The group later joined, fully reunited with Will, who had been rescued and brought to the hospital. In October 1984, Dustin and his friends became intrigued by Max Mayfield after her arrival in Hawkins. However, the group became more concerned about Will's well-being after he started behaving unusually, a lingering side effect from his time in the Upside Down. On Halloween night, Dustin discovered a slug-like creature in his trash that he named Dart, and hid him from in his home. This proved to be a mistake when Dart grew into a juvenile Demogorgon. However, due to Dustin's influence, Dart proved to be somewhat more docile than the rest of his kind. Ultimately, Dustin, Lucas, Max, Steve, and Mike assisted in the Mind Flayer's defeat by burning a core part of the Upside Down hive mind. The pack of juvenile Demogorgon, including Dart, died soon after which 11 closed the gate. 1 month later, Dustin attended Hawkins Middle School Snowball with his friends. All the girls rejected Dustin's invitation to dance with him, but Nancy Wheeler invited Dustin to a light-headed dance, lifting his spirit. In the summer of 1985, Dustin spent a month away making gadgets at Camp Knows where he befriended and ultimately started a romantic relationship with Susie Bingham, a computer expert from Salt Lake City. Upon returning to Returning to Hawkins, Dustin was annoyed by his friend's distinct in his new radio cerebro, as well as their skepticism of Susie's existence. While trying to communicate with Susie with Cerebro, Dustin accidentally interrupted a Russian language transmission. Afterwards, he requested Steve, along with Steve's co-worker Robin Buckley and Lucas' younger sister Erica, to help him with the message. The message led them to discover the Russians were in Hawkins working on opening another gate at the Earth Starcourt Mill. After escaping the Russian base, Dustin reunited and reconciled with his friends and helped them defeat the Mind Flayer once again. Dustin obtained planks constant from Susie, which Joyce and Byers and Jim Hopper needed to so they could destroy the Russian machine and close the gate. 3 months later, Dustin said goodbye to Will and Eleven as they move out to Hawkins. He and Lucas give Will Dungeons and Dragons to Erica. By the spring of 1986, tech-savvy Dustin long-distance relationship with Susie is still going strong, and he now is part of the Dungeons and Dragons group Hellfire's Club, along with Lucas and Mike. The dedication to the club subjects Mike and Dustin to the triades of demands of the club's dungeons master, Eddie. When Eddie becomes a suspect in the murder of fellow student Chrissy Cunningham, Dustin and his friends discover an entity from the Upside Down known as Vecna is responsible for Chrissy's death. As Vecna begins committing murders around Hawkins, Dustin and his friends work together to investigate Vecna and stop him. However, upon discovering Vecna's true identity and motives, Dustin and his friends formulate a plan in an attempt to kill Vecna. Dustin joins Eddie, Robin, Steve, and Nancy in venturing into the Upside Down, where he and Eddie distract the demo bats guarding Vecna's hideout. The Creel house, however, while fighting the demo bats, Dustin gets injured, where Eddie ends up being killed after preventing the demon bats from entering in the real world through the gate. 2 days later, Dustin reunites with Mike, Will, and Eleven before joining Steve and Robin to delivering donations to survivors of an earthquake that occurred after defeating Vecna. Dustin encounters Eddie's uncle and guardian, Wayne Munson, where he sadly informed him of his nephew's death and how he saved Hawkins before witnessing particles from the Upside Down falling down over Hawkins due the opening of a fourth gate across town. Well, I always liked Dustin. His humor and ingeniousness is affectionate, and you really need a character like that in this doomness of story. I love how his reaction is with the different characters. And I also love the moment when he started to get a girlfriend, and let's be honest, those two are perfect. I think Dustin is very brave, and you always can count on him. The moment that caught me the most was when Eddie was dying and Dustin talking later with Eddie's uncle. When Lucas' best friend, Will Byers, mysteriously went missing, he and his other friends, Mike and Dustin, made it their mission to find him. However, while searching for Will, they stumbled upon a mysterious girl named Eleven. Lucas was suspicious of Eleven's behavior and actions, and believed she was taking advantage of Mike's hospitality. He also doubted the apparent supernatural circumstances behind Will's disappearance. A rift grew between the kids, prompting Lucas to investigate Hawkins' National Laboratory on his own. However, this only made Lucas realize that 11 was trying to protect him and his friends from the threat of the government's agents and the danger that lurks within Hawkins' lab. Lucas consulted with 11, Mike, and Dustin, and helped his friend battle the Demogorgon. In the end, Lucas was reunited with Will and celebrated Christmas with his friends. In 1984, Lucas and his friends become intrigued by Max Mayfield after her arrival in Hawkins. However, the group became more concerned about Will's well-being after he started behaving unusually. While investigating the upside-down incursion into Hawkins, Lucas and Max eventually developed feelings for each other. Despite the threatening behavior of Max's erratic stepbrother Billy, ultimately Lucas, Max, Steve, Dustin, and Mike assisted in the Mind Flayer defeat by burning a core part of the upside-down hive mind. 1 month later, Lucas attended Hawkins Middle Snow Bowl with his friends and began a romantic relationship with Max, as they danced and shared a kiss. By the summer of 1985, Lucas and Max had gone through various circles of dating, breaking up and getting back together. In late June, Max ditched Lucas to hang out with 11 instead, forcing the group to split up. However, the party attention soon shifted to Max's stepbrother Billy Hangrove, who was noted to be acting unusually. The group later discovered that Billy and various other Hawkins residents were possessed by an incarnation of the Mind Flayer, prompting the party and their allies to band together to defeat them. Lucas came up with the idea to use fireworks against the creature, which wounded the beast and distracted it long enough to prevent 11's death. 3 months later, Lucas said goodbye to Will and 11 as they moved away from Hawkins and agreed with Dustin to hand their Dungeons & Dragons set to Lucas' younger sister Erica. By the spring of 1986, Lucas had joined the Hawkins High School basketball team, and his busy schedule got in the way of his time at the Hellfire Club, much to his friends Dustin and Mike's frustration. Tired of being bullied, Lucas hoped that joining the basketball team would make him more popular. His relationship with Max had also fallen apart due to her social withdrawal following Billy's death, leaving Lucas worried about her, but she refused to open up to him. After Jason Carver's girlfriend and various other students were mysteriously killed, Lucas slowly realized he had been hanging with the wrong crowd. Unnerved by Jason's scrub coating of Eddie and the Hellfire. Reuniting with his best friends, Lucas learned an entity from the Upside Down named Vecna was responsible for the murders and was using the psychic connection with his victims to open a new series of gates. While trying to stop Vecna, Lucas ended up in a deadly scuffle with Jason, who had tracked him and his friends to the Creel house. Trudy ultimately overpowered Jason. He was powerless to stop Vecna's psychic attack on Max, and the cataclysmic opening of 4 gigantic gates covering in downtown Hawkins. Max would ultimately survive Vecna's attack due to an intervention by 11. Though Max remained comatose, Lucas deemed 11 actions to be a miracle. In the day that followed, Lucas stayed by Max's side in the hospital and read books to her. Later, Lucas and Erica watched in fear as the upside-down spores began falling across Hawkins. Max was originally from California and had a keen interest in skateboarding from a young age. Following her mother's divorce and remarriage to Neil Hargrove in 1984, Max and her erratic stepbrother Billy moved to Hawkins, Indiana. Max quickly gained a reputation at the Palace Arcade for topping the game leaderboard. Her high score submitted under the player name Mad Max. Max's high scores captured the attention of arcade regulars Dustin, Lucas, Will, and Mike, who mistakenly assumed her to be a boy. After Maxine joined the boys' class at Hawkins Middle School, they realized the new girl and the mysterious Mad Max were one and the same. On Halloween, Max crossed paths with the boys while trick-or-treating, and despite being weirded out by their earliest behavior, had a chance of heart and sought the befriends them. Dustin and Lucas, each secretly pinning for her affection, wanted to make Max an official member of the party, but Mike pushed back against the idea. When Will started experiencing strange episodes, Max took notice and became even more curious after learning of Will's disappearance the previous year. Though her new friends were initially reluctant to explain what had happened to Will, Lucas eventually divulged the whole history of events involving Will, 11, the Demogorgon, and the Upside Down. Though skeptical at first, Max's convictions would shift after encountering a pack of faceless humanoids predators alongside Lucas. Distant and their friends, Steve Harrington, Max and her friends soon realized Will was possessed by the Mind Flayer, a malevolent entity serving as the mind and heart of the Upside Down, whose influence in Hawkins was expanding in the form of a gigantic vine-like tunnel burying deep beneath the city. Max grew romantically attached to Lucas, but had an awkward first meeting with 11 upon her return to Hawkins. After standing up to an erratic and violent Billy after his assault on Steve at the buyer's house, Max further proved her worth, stealing Billy's car and transporting the group to the underground tunnels. There they assisted in the fight against the Mind Flayer by attacking the Upside Down shared hive mind. After defeating the Mind Flayer, Max attended the Snowball with her new friends and after sharing her first kiss with Lucas, would begin a relationship with him. By the summer of 1985, Max had befriended 11, while going through cycles of dating Lucas, breaking up with him and getting back together again. However, to Max's discomfort, the party's attention shifted to Billy after he was noted to be acting unusually. The group would later discover that Billy had become possessed by the Mind Flayer, prompting the party and their allies to band together to defeat them. While the group battled the spider monster with fireworks at Starcourt Mall, 11 reminded Billy of his humanity. Her words prompted Billy to sacrifice his life to save 11, which horrified and traumatized Max. Desperate her rocky relationship with Billy, Max was deeply affected by her stepbrother's loss and experienced a profound sense of grief, surviving growth and depression. 3 months later, Max, along with the rest of the party, tearfully said goodbye to the Byers and 11, who had been relocated in California by Dr. Owens. Months later, Max still struggles with Billy's lust, suffering from frequent nightmares in which she would relive the moment of his death. She isolated herself from her friends. Breaking up for good with Lucas. However, in March 1986, she decided to help her old friends investigate the murder of Chrissy Cunningham, who died across the street from her home. After learning that Chrissy was also seemed to go to the same school counselor, Max realized she was experiencing the same symptoms as Chrissy and began seeing disturbing hallucinations superimposed onto the world around her. Max and her friends came to the conclusion that she had been cursed by a mysterious upside-down entity dubbed Vecna, and that she didn't have much time to live. However, Max was able to survive Vecna's attacks when her friends played her favorite song over the headphones, giving her the emotional strength to defy Vecna's return to reality. After discovering Vecna's plan to use the murders to open 4 gates, the group came up with a plan of attack. Max would act as bait to distract Vecna, while Nancy, Steve, and Robin would attack his real body in the Upside Down. At the abandoned Creel house, Max made herself hallucinate again, but to her surprise, 11 appears in her visions via her power of psychic projection. However, Vecna overpowered 11 and began killing Max. 11 found the strength to overcome Vecna's control, and at the same time, Nancy, Steve, and Robin set Vecna's physical form ablaze. Their action meant Max initially survived the attack, though she was blinded and her limbs were broken. For a moment, her heart even stopped. This technical death triggered the opening of the 4th and final curse gate, wreaking havoc across Havoc. However, 11 used her abilities to restart Max's heart. She was brought back to life, but remained comatose, teetering on the boundary between life and death. I always have liked Max. She is cool and dope, but I was very happy she fell in love with Lucas. I hated how Billy, her stepbrother, treated her. Sometimes I could murder him for it. I think that is one of the reasons she is how she becomes who she is. I also think the way Billy treated her was just a reaction of how abusive his father was towards him. So he would react it on her. I love what they did, making Running Up the Hill her theme song and her favorite song. This hit of Kate Bush became hot again because of Stranger Things. I do love the way how she can be a tomboy, but also a girly girl, like when she helped Elle with a new look. Nancy. In the fall of 1983, Nancy was a straightforward teenager with a straightforward life, unsure whether she prioritized spending time with her best friend, Barbara Holland, or with her new boyfriend, Steve Harrington. However, everything changed when Barb vanished without a trace, prompting Nancy to team up with loner Jonathan Byers, whose younger brother Will also vanished. Slowly, the two put together the pieces of the puzzles and realized a monster from another dimension had kidnapped Barb and Will. While Will was lucky enough to escape the creature's full wrath, Nancy was horrified to learn that Barb had been killed, making her more determined than ever to defeat the creature. Nancy and Jonathan set up a booby trap at the Byers' house, and with the unlikely last-minute assistance of Steve, helped to gravely wound the creature. In the fall of 1984, Nancy struggled to grieve. Barb created a rift between her and Steve, leading her to drunkenly confess that she didn't love him anymore. Seeking revenge on the people responsible for unleashing the creature that killed Barbara, she once again teamed up with Jonathan and a journalist named Murray Bauman to expose Hawkins' lab. In the process, she and Jonathan grew closer together, eventually succumbing to their feelings and becoming romantically involved. Returning to Hawkins, Nancy and Jonathan learned that another entity from the alternate dimension had possessed Will. Nancy assists Jonathan and his mother in exorcism the creature from Will's body. A month later, Nancy and Murray succeeded in shutting down Hawkins National Laboratory, with Barb's death attributed to a chemical leak. Nancy attended Barb's funeral and broke up with Steve to be with Jonathan. By the summer of 1985, Nancy and Jonathan became interns for the Hawkins Post, where Nancy was frequently disrespected by her boss, Tom Holloway, and colleagues, including Bruce Lowe, working late one night. She answered a call about deceased rats in the town and secretly investigated with Jonathan. This eventually caused the pair to be fired, creating a rift between Nancy and Jonathan. But after receiving some encouragement from her mother, Nancy picked the story back up and discovered that the rats were linked to the same entity that possessed Will. After reconciling, Nancy and Jonathan joined forces with Nancy's younger brother and his friends in once again defeating what the kids called the Mind Flayer. 3 months later, the Byers family moved out of Hawkins after being relocated to California by Dr. Sam Owens. Nancy and Jonathan tearfully parted ways, through remaining committed to staying together. In the spring of 1986, Nancy became a reporter and editor for the Hawkins High newspaper, the Weekly Streak. Despite Nancy and Jonathan's enduring love for each other, neither of them could get away to meet up for spring breaks. When a high school student named Chrissy Cunningham was mysteriously murdered, Nancy sought to investigate her death with her classmate Fred Benson. However, after Fred was killed, Nancy met up with Steve, Dustin and Max, and Robin and learned an entity called Vecna was responsible for killing Chrissy and Fred. While investigating, Nancy would find a connection between Vecna and the death of the Creel family in the 1950s with Robin, whom she began striking a friendship with. Nancy would find a connection between Vecna and the death on the Creel family in 1950 with Robin, whom she began striking friendship. When Vecna trapped Nancy in his mind, she discovered Vecna's true identity and Henry Creel and was the first child test subjects of Hawkins' lab, along with his plans to open gates across Hawkins in order to replace the upside-down monsters. After Vecna willingly let Nancy go, she has informed her friends on her discoveries and they came up with a plan to kill Vecna. Unfortunately, Nancy, Steve and Robin only managed to wound Vecna severely and weren't able to prevent 4 gates from opening across Hawkins. 2 days later, Nancy reunited with Jonathan and though they were happy to see each other, Nancy was hesitated to admit that the relationship did not have any problems, while unaware Jonathan was lying to her about his acceptance letter for college. After reuniting with Joyce and Jim Hopper, who was revealed to be alive due to spending 8 months in a Soviet prison, Nancy and Jonathan, along with their friends, witnessed the Upside Down beginning to merge in Hawkins, fulfilling Vecna's plan. I don't know what to think about Nancy. Maybe that is because she has this love triangle with Steve and Jonathan. In one way, she is very cool in how she picked up the gun to just being a part of killing Vecna's smashing good. We all know what she has, a true side, tough side, but also a soft side if it comes to people. Steve, a student at Hawkins High School. He was best friends with Tommy Hagenland, Carol Perkins, and the boyfriend of Nancy Wheeler. When Nancy's best friend Barbara Holland disappeared, she became distant and Steve thought she was cheating with Jonathan Byers. Following a few ignorant actions, Steve had a change of heart, told his friends off, and set out to make things right. By coincidence, he ended up heroically saved the day and reconciled with his girlfriend. In 1984, following a falling out with Nancy, Steve became an ally to the party, especially Dustin Henderson, with whom he formed an unlikely friendship. He became a sort of authority figure for the party and became a major player in the battle against the Mind Flayer. In 1985, Steve worked at an ice cream shop called Scoops Ahoy, along with Robin Buckley, who gave him a hard time when he struck out with the ladies. Feeling self-conscious about not getting into college and working a low-wage job, he was more than willing to help Dustin, who had just come in to him with a strange radio transmission. Steve, along with Robin, helps Dustin translate a secret Russian transmission. They discovered there were Russians in Hawkins, working underneath Starcourt Mall. Steve, along with Dustin, Robin, and Lucas, Sinclair's youngest sister, Erica Sinclair, discovered the Russians were trying to reopen the portal to the Upside Down. Steve also formed a friendship with Robin and later accepted her sexuality. Steve later learned of the Mind Flayer's return and helped the rest of the party battle against it until the gate was closed again. 3 months later, Steve remained best friends with Robin and they applied for new jobs at Family Video. In 1986, Steve was still working at Family Video with Robin and he was still finding it difficult to find a new girlfriend. He learned about the murder at the Forest Hill trailer park of Chrissy Cunningham from the news on TVs in the store. Later, after finding out more information about the victim from Max Mayfield, Dustin, they then traced down Eddie Munson, who was the prime suspect of Chrissy's death. Steve, along with Max, Robin, and Dustin, went to Reverse Rick's house, Eddie's drugs dealer, where he learned about the dark wizard of the Upside Down named Vecna. While investigating Vecna with his friends, Steve started to grow closer with Nancy again. After being dragged into the Upside Down and nearly being killed by the swarm of demo bats, Steve was saved by Nancy, Robin, and Eddie before they managed to escape the Upside Down, where Nancy discovered Vecna's true identity as Henry Creel and won. The first child test subject of Hawkins National Laboratory. With this discovery, Steve and his friends formulated a plan to kill Vecna and stop from opening 4 gates across Hawkins. However, Steve and Nancy and Robin were only able to severely injure Vecna and could not prevent him from opening the gates. 2 days later, Steve, Robin, and Dustin worked to help survivors of an earthquake that was caused when the gates opened. Steve happily watched Robin beginning to bond with her crush Vicky before witnessing particles from the Upside Down falling down over Hawkins. Thank God this pretty boy changed his mind of being friends who were simply bullies. And like Lucas' basketball friends, I hated them. Now I think of it, there are a lot of bullies in this series. 11 was also being bullied and she didn't have her powers, so he revenged herself to smash into her nemesis' head with a roller skate. I was thinking this too when I saw that episode. A lot of skating rinks have been closed, but it would be nice if they opened them again. Then kids have something fun to do, and instead of being behind the computer, they can do something physically fun. I remember Garrett Wang, who played Ensign Kim in Star Trek Voyager, was talking about that, and I would say, yeah, why not? In the fall of 1983, Jonathan's youngest brother Will vanished without a trace due to Jonathan working late. Will's disappearance made Jonathan guilt-ridden for not being there and would soon take a toll on his relationship with his mother, who insisted Will was trapping in the walls and taken by a monster with no face. Jonathan dismissed Joyce's claims and a sign of a mental breakdown and took it up upon himself to take care of the funeral arrangements of Will's body being recovered from the town's quarry. However, he realized his mother was telling the truth after his classmates Nancy Wheely began claiming her best friend was also taken by a monster. After reconciling with his mother, Nancy and Jonathan turned the boys' home into a booby trap to lure and kill the monster. With the help of Jonathan's former bully and Nancy's boy's friend, Steve Harrington, the trio lit the monster on fire until it vanished. Soon after, Will was rescued from the dimension and was reunited with his brother and mother. In the fall of 1984, Jonathan struggled to both see this appeal in the mother's boyfriend, Bob Newby, and comfort his traumatized brother. After seeing Nancy struggling to keep secret of the government agents responsible for Barbara's death, Jonathan bands together with her to expose Hawkins' lab alongside journalist Murray Bauman. In the process, the two slowly begin to embrace their romantic feelings for another. Returning home, Jonathan and Nancy assist Joyce in freeing a possessed Will from another entity from the Upside Down known as the Mind Flayer. A month later, Nancy and Jonathan have become an official couple. In the summer of 1985, Jonathan and Nancy have gotten summer jobs as interns for the Hawkins Post. Jonathan tried his best to comfort Nancy, who was subjugated to sexism by their co-workers, but believed that pursuing a story about deceased rats wouldn't prove anything and would only get them in trouble. Despite this, he regularly joined his girlfriend in investigating Mrs. Dracul claims that 6 rats are eating fertilizer, only to get fired by their boss Tom Holloway. This put a strain on Nancy and Jonathan's relationship, as Jonathan angrily tells her that she doesn't understand how important the job is to his family compared to Nancy, who is very prejudiced. The next day, however, Nancy called Jonathan to tell him that the rats are connected to the Mind Flayer, causing him to join her, their siblings and friends, to defeat the Mind Flayer once again. During this, Jonathan profusely apologized to Nancy, and they reconcile. 3 months after killing the Mind Flayer, Jonathan moves out of Hawkins with his family and tearfully says goodbye to Nancy. In the spring of 1986, Jonathan resides in Lenora Hills, California, where he began to smoke weed alongside his new best friend Argyle. They would stress about college. He and Nancy agreed to both attend Emerson College in Massachusetts, despite his acceptance putting him in financial debt. Jonathan reveals to Argyle he's got accepted to Lenora Hills Community College and is struggling to break the news to Nancy, saying he doesn't want her to follow him and ruin her life while also not wanting to go to Emerson to chase a dream that isn't his. When Eleven is taken to get her powers back to fight a new threat that's killing people in Hawkins, Jonathan hails a ride from Argyle and escaped a military raid of the home alongside Mike and Will. The quartet make a cross-country road trip to Utah and Nevada to locate Elle. While traveling, Jonathan takes notice of his brother's Will struggling emotionally to show his feelings towards Mike. He eventually apologized to his brother for being absent in his life and telling him he will always be his supporter no matter what. After creating a sensory deprivation tank at a Surfer Boy Pizza in Nevada, Al temporarily defeats Vector, and the crew returns to Hawkins. Reuniting with Nancy, the two are happily yet seem in denial that their relationship doesn't have any problems, with Jonathan fibbing to Nancy that his acceptance letter had yet arrived. After returning with his mother and Hopper, he witnessed along with his family the beginning of the Upside Down invading Hawkins. I always liked Jonathan. He really did good care for his mom and brother. I think he's one of the mature young adults in this series. Of course he made his mistake, but also in Friends. But in the end, he is a good lad. What I also love about him is that he is there at the right moment, in the right time, and will do everything to keep his loved ones safe. In the summer of 1985, Robin began working at the newly built Starcourt Mall ice cream parlor Scoops Ahoy. Alongside her former classmate Steve Harrington, Robin often made Steve the butt of many jokes due to his fleeting popularity and failure to attract any female customers. When Steve and his friend Destin Henderson attempted to crack an intercepted Russian code, Robin assisted through her knowledge of many languages. She figured out that Russians were using the mall food chains and businesses to smuggle supplies into Hawkins. Eventually, the three discovered that the Soviets had carried out an elaborate scheme. Starcourt Mall was merely a front to conceal the constructions of an underground Soviet base. With the assistance of Erica Sinclair, the group snuck into the base, where they discovered the Soviets had developed a means to travel to another dimension. Stephen and Robin were eventually captured and taken hostage, but were rescued by Dustin and Erica. Upon their return to the surface, Robin got involved with the fight against the Mind Flayer and the possessed Billy Hargrove. 3 months later, Robin and Steve would get jobs at the local Families Video. By the springs of 1986, Robin was still patiently enduring Steve's rants about his complicated love life, while harboring a massive crush on Vicky, a fellow member of her school marching band. Her attention would be driven by more pressing concerns. However, after a string of mysterious murder shocked Hawkins, Robin, Steve, and Dustin investigate, with Robin befriending Nancy Wheeler and Eddie Munson in the process. They discovered the murders were potentially linked to an infamous massacre from 1959 and eventually discovered a new gate to the Upside Down at the bottom of Lover's Lake. After traveling through the gate and getting strangled in the Upside Down, Robin, Steve, Eddie, and Nancy eventually escape and reconvented with their younger allies. The group made a plan to stop the supernatural threat, with Robin, Steve, and Nancy venturing back into the Upside Down to attack Vecna. Despite their best effort, the group were unable to prevent Vecna's fourth gate from opening, wreaking havoc across Hawkins. 2 days later, Robin volunteered to help victims of the earthquake, accidentally encountering and bonding with Vicky in the process. Later, Robin watched in fear as the Upside Down sporing began falling across Hawkins. Robin is a character I liked, not because she is crazy, but just on who she is. And I think she have a major role to play in being gay. And in one way, I think it's very important that people growing less anti-LGBTQ. And by the way, I don't know if you have noticed, but the girl Vicky is well known as the actress in Any Anne with an E. And I love how she played Anne in Anne with an E. And she played this also in this series. She played that little hyper girl and doing everything. And I don't know if she is this in real life, but who knows? Maybe she is like that in real life, and she plays like this all the time at her because yeah, that's just how she is. Wait a minute. Didn't she also play in Sherlock Holmes? No. That was that was Bobby Brown who played 11. She played Enola Holmes. I love stories about Enola Holmes from Netflix, by the way. But okay. Well, Eddie Munson. Eddie was a student at Hawkins High School, and the idiosyncratic leader of the Hellfire Club, an introvert-friendly group orientated around Dungeons and Dragons. He was an electric guitar player in his band, Corroded Coven, and the friend of Dustin Henderson, Lucas Sinclair, Mike Wheeler. In 1986, Eddie witnessed the shocking supernatural killing of his friend Chrissy Cunningham. This spurred him on to seek justice for Chrissy, joined forces with the party and their allies to investigate the cause of the murder. Eddie also became the unfortunate target of Chrissy's boyfriend, Jason Carver, who I really hate too. It was, who mistakenly believed Eddie to be her murderer and rallied members of the basketball team together in an effort to track Eddie down. Ultimately, Eddie and his friends discovered that Vecna, a humanoid being from an alternate dimension called Upside Down, was to blame for Chrissy's death and was continuing the murder on others like her. Eventually, Eddie used the power of heavy metal to distract Vecna's swarm of demon bats as the other launched an assault at the Creel house. Unluckily for Eddie, he bit the lure away. The bats ultimately costed him his life. In the days that follow, Eddie continues to be misrepresented as a murderer and cult leader. But Dustin consoled his grieving uncle, assuring him those close to Eddie would always remember him differently. You know, I think a lot of fans love that heavy metal scene. I love it too. I am not a fan of heavy metal music, but that iconic scene, wow, I really, really loved it. And he's really eccentric, and maybe that is one thing I like about him. His friendship with Dustin and the others was really nice to see too. Like them, he was an outsider, and that he'd been owned by Lucas' younger sister was a hilarious moment. Although he is loud, he has a heart of gold. He was misunderstood and became the devil of the village people, and people were scared of him just because he was a member of the Hellfire Club, a D&D playing nerd club. Also, I know how it is to be shunned like that. So Eddie reminded me of my bad days in the past. Billy Hargrove. He was the older stepbrother of Max Mayfield, who he often mistreated among others. He got a job as a lifeguard at the Hawkins community pool alongside Heather Holloway and flirted with Karen Wheeler. Eventually he came under the possession of the Mind Flayer, who used him as a vessel and as a tool to gather the victims, civilians of Hawkins, to create a larger physical vessel to host the Mind Flayer, the spider monster. Unlike the rest of the Flayered, he was never interrogated into the spider integrated into the spider monster's body and was granted a degree of superhuman abilities while acting under the mind's flayer's command. During the moment in which Billy dragged Eleven towards the mind flayer and was about to give her up to it, she was able to reach his humanity by reminding Billy of the boy he was. The boy that existed before his mother's departure, which left him to be raised by his abusive father, eventually turning him into the bully he became. Deciding to make a change, Billy physically held back the flayer, who killed him by stabbing him in the chest. In his final words, he apologized to Mask. His dad was covered up by the government as part of the Starcon Mall fire. The following year, his death had a major effect on Max, who removed herself from her friends and was eventually targeted by a new force from the Upside Down due to her trauma. Like I said, I never liked Billy. He's just a big bully, but I can understand where he is coming from. His stepfather was an abuser. It also is a little ironic that the Shadow Monster and Vecna choose him as an outside force in the normal world. Argyle. Argyle is the best friend of Jonathan Byers. Upon his move to California and as a delivery pizza for Server Boy's Pizza. By 1986, due to having no friends of his own, Argyle developed a friendship with Jonathan Byers after his latter and his family moved to Lenora Hills last year. Argyle would try to help Jonathan with his French relationships problems with his girlfriend, Nancy Wheeler, and his plans for college. When Jonathan's house is under attack by military soldiers, Argyle rescued them, his brother Will, Nancy's brothers Mike, and their protector agent Hammond. After Hammond's death, Argyle would learn of his new friend's conflict with the government agents, a dark dimension known as the Upside Down, and how Jonathan's foster sister Eleven was a former test subject, professionally possessing physical powers. Argyle would help his friends look for Eleven, and after finding her with her powers back, Argyle continued to help his friends by creating a sensory depression tank for Eleven to use to fight Vecna, an evil entity terrorizing Hawkins, Indiana. 2 days later, Argyle drove his friends to Hawkins, where he would help rebuild 11 former home and forage mushrooms, before particles from the Upside Down began to infect Hawkins due to the opening of the 4 gates. Hopper was chief of police in the small, sleepy town of Hawkins, Indiana, where he used to live out a carefree existence through forever haunted by his troubled past. After an old friend, Joyce Byers, reported that her son Will had mysteriously disappeared, Hopper's life became infinitely more complicated. He began to unravel a conspiracy involved the nearby Hawkins National Laboratory. Discovering the lab had conducted experiments that accidentally opened a gate to an alternate dimension. During the investigation, Hopper and Joyce met 11, the escaped child test subject who unwillingly opened the gate using special psychoclinic abilities. Eventually, Hopper and Joyce were permitted to travel through the gate and search for Will, finding him strung up in the alternated vision of the public library. He was unconscious but alive. Later that year, Hopper discovered that 11, presumed to be deceased, was actually alive, living by herself in the woods. He decided to take her in, providing a home for her in his cabin, and did everything in his power to hide her from the authorities. After local crop began to rot in October 1986, Hopper discovered that mysterious tunnel beneath Hawkins, where the source of the clay. Dr. Owens, the new head of Hawkins' lab, reluctantly informed him that the interdimensional gate beneath the facility was actively growing in size, and it turns corrupting the surrounding environment. Later, Hopper and Owens were took off guard when a pack of adolescent demogorgons called Demongodogs, hailing from the alternate dimension, attacked the laboratory, with Hopper and his allies only narrowing surviving. The immediate threat was neutralized when 11, accompanied by Hopper, returned to the laboratory. 11 scaled the gate with her special abilities, cutting off the connection to what she called the Upside Down. In the month that followed, Hawkins' lab was shut down, with Hopper watching a cement field in the last trace of the gate. With Owen's help, Hopper was able to officially adopt 11, her legal name becoming Jane Hopper. In June 1985, Joyce started fretting over magnets falling to stick to her refrigerator. She believed something strange was once again occurring in Hawkins. A skeptical Hopper sought to dismiss her concern, taking her to the abandoned Hawkins lab to show her that the nightmare of Upside Down was over. However, while searching through the facility, Hopper encountered a mysterious Russian assassin and became engaged in combat. Following this, Hopper and Joyce began investigating a vast conspiracy involving the corrupt mayor, suspicious activity at the local power grid, and the newly built Starcourt Mall. After finding the Soviet scientist Dr. Alex and taking him hostage, the three met with the Russian-speaking journalist Murray Bauman. I think Bauman is more like a KGB spy or whatever. He played both sides, but he was in one way very irritating. But in the other hand, he was in a way a good person. But okay. Through Murray, Alexei told the Americans that a secret base had been built on the Starcourt Mall. The base housed an experimental technology which could pry open the already weakened fabric of reality in Hawkins, Indiana. After building off what the Scoop Troop had learned, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray infiltrated the secret base and set out to disable the Soviet machine. However, upon reaching the control room, Hopper was ambushed by the hitman he and Joyce encountered at Hawkins' lab. Though Hopper ultimately overpowered and killed Gregory, Joyce was forced to disable the Violator machine while Hopper stood nearby. While Joyce looked away, Hopper dived for cover and landed on a lower platform and electricity flowed at this facility. Though he had survived, Hopper was soon captured by the Soviets and was presumed deceased by the rest of the Hawkins. The Soviets tortured him for information and forced him into servitude at their prison, camping Kamchatka. By March 1986, Hopper had struck up a complicated friendship with security guard Dmitry Anatov. Hopper decided he would try to break free, and despite some initial inheritance, Dmitry decided to help him. Anatov sent a package containing a hidden message for Joyce, which prompted her and Murray to travel to Russia in an effort to free him. Meanwhile, Hopper and numerous other prisoners were informed they were to fight a captured humanoid predator, a Demogorgon from the Upside Down. Hopper evaded the wrath of the creature. Moments later, he was pleasantly surprised to be reunited with Joyce and Murray, who had infiltrated the facility. Despite escaping to Yuri Ismailov warehouse in Karasgaran, the group reunited returned to the prison after learning Hopper and Joyce's children were imperiled by a new evil threatening Hawkins. They hoped that by destroying swirling particles they had witnessed at the base, a captured fragment of the Mind Flayer, they could deal damage to the upside-down hive mind and assist their friends in need. Returning to the prison, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray learned that gunfire shattered the tank holding the Mind Flayer's fragment, and numerous cryogenically frozen Demodogs, with the Mind Flayers reanimating the Demodogs. The Americans set out to kill the Demodogs and the Russian Demogorgon, fighting for their lives while hoping to inflict pain upon the hive mind. After some time, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray managed to execute all the creatures, with Dimitri, Anatov, and Yuri arriving by helicopter to take them back to America. 2 days later, Hopper and 11 happily reunited at the old cabin. Moments later, Hopper, 11, and their allies watched in horror as 4 newly opened gates spewed plumes of smoke at the upside-down spores across Hawkins. Hopper is one of my favorite characters. I love what he did for the gang and, of course, for 11. His character grows in each season, and one thing is great to see. Two things. One is that he is getting tougher each time. 2, he is open to new things, which is a great part in 11 and her world. In November 1983, after Will mysteriously disappeared, Joyce was certain that he was communicating with her through the lights in her house. Despite everyone treating her as if she was having a mental breakdown, Joyce refused to believe that Will was dead, even after his alleged corpse was found. Through cooperation with her friend and local police chief Jim Hopper, Will's friends, and Jonathan, she eventually uncovered the circumstances of her son's disappearance and entered the Upside Down to rescue him. A year later, in 1984, Joyce struggles to live a normal life with her charming boyfriend Bob Newby, while also growing overprotected of Will, who has been suffering from visions of the Upside Down. As her son's health declined rapidly, she, Bob, Hopper, and Will's friend Mike discovered that Will has become possessed by the Upside Down most dangerous inhabitant, the Mind Flayer, who summoned an army of adolescent Demogorgons called Demodogs to attack Hawkins. After losing Bob to said creatures, George refused to lose her son to the monster, burning it out of Will and once again saving him. However, she struggles to recover following the aftermath of Bob's death. By the summer of 1985, Joyce is extremely lonely and rebirths Hopper's romantic interest, despite growing an interest in him. But everything changed when she discovered her magnets losing their magnetism. Believing it has to have to do with something with the Upside Down, Joyce convinced the reluctant Hopper to investigate and discover Russians have infiltrated Hawkins to weaponize the Upside Down's inhabitants, and are using the town's power to open the gate the crew had worked so hard to close. Soon George Hopper and Russian scientist named Alexei and Hopper's acquaintance Murray Bauman race back to Hawkins and team up with their children to close the gate once more, all while being chased by a Russian assassin. George successfully closed the gate, but at the cost of Hopper's life, as he seemingly disintegrated upon the gate explosion. Joyce then adopted Hopper's daughter, 11, into her family, and 3 months later tearfully moved off Hawkins. By the spring of 1986, Joyce has moved from Hawkins to California with her 2 sons and 11. While working from home, selling encyclopedias by phone, she received a strange package from Russia and is determined to figure out who is behind it. She opens the box and finds a doll with a note hidden inside, which says that Hopper is alive and is present in Russia. She has to call a number to ransom him. The number connected her to Dmitry Anatov, who demands payment of $40,000 in return for helping Hopper's escape. Using pilot Yuri Ismailov and a proxy as a proxy, Joyce calls Murray, who comes to Lenora Hills. Together they call Dimitri and learn the ransom is true and Hopper is indeed alive. Then they both fly to Alaska and meet with Yuri, who double-crossed both them and Anatov in order to receive the reward for their capture. However, midway through the fight to the USSR, Joyce and Murray managed to subdue Yuri. With no one able to fly the airplane, they crash land in the USSR. But Murray, Joyce, and Yuri survived the plane crash. They force Yuri to tell them where Hopper is, and they go to the isolated Gulag to find that Hopper and Anatov, along with other disgraced prisoners, are meant to fight a captive Demogorgon. The Demogorgon kills all prisoners except for Anatov and Hopper. While Hopper holds off the Demogorgon, Joyce and Murray defeat the guards and manage to open the door to the arena, allowing Hopper and Anatov to escape of the Demogorgon, where Joyce unites with Hopper. However, before they can escape from Russia, Joyce and Hopper learn from one of the Dr. Owen's agents that their children are in danger due to facing a new evil threatening Hawkins. Knowing they will never make it back to the United States in time, Joyce, Hopper, and Murray return to Russia, goes to kill the Russian Demogorgon and an isolated fragment of Mind Flayer to give their children an upper hand. They learned that gunfire shattered the tanks holding the Mind Flayers and several cryogenically frozen Demodogs. Through the piece of the Mind Flayers possessed the Demodogs, Joyce, Hopper, and Murray were eventually successful in killing them and the Russian Demogorgon and several cryogenically frozen Demodogs. Through the piece of the Mind Flayer possessed the Demodogs. And I already read that. Oh crap. 2 days later, Joyce and Hopper returned to Hawkins, where they reunited with their children before witnessing the 4 gates to the Upside Down beginning to merge into Hawkins. Brenner, who allegedly worked for the U.S. Department of Energy, was a government figure steeped in mystery and controversy. He was a research scientist and the director of Hawkins Natural Laboratory until November 1983. He had a major role in various controversial experiments and programs, including Project MK Ultra. In 1959, Brenner was contracted by a fearful woman concerned by the strange behavior of her son, Henry, after she and her daughter were found dead at her house, and the Patricia Victor presumed to be the murderer. Brenner convinced government higher up to let him take Henry into his custody. After finding out that Henry possessed dangerous psychoclinical abilities, Brenner figured out how to disable them with an implanted chip, while also reproducing these abilities in a number of child test subjects at Hawkins' lab, including 11. On September 8, 1979, Brennan's fears came true when Henry manipulated 11 into removing his power suppressant chip and proceeded to go on a murderous rampage throughout the facility using his restored abilities. Brennan was indirectly knocked unconscious during the attack and was shocked to discover the massacre of his children and colleagues upon awakening. He later learned 11, the sole survivor of the massacre, had somehow defeated Henry, causing him to mysteriously vanish. Brenna was impressed by Eleven's feat and was disappointed when she proved unable to reproduce the same raw strength upon waking from her coma. In the years that follow, Brenna tested the limits of Eleven's abilities through various experiments. In November 1982, Brenna experiments indirectly unleashed a monster from another dimension into Hawkins, allowing Eleven to escape the lab. In the following week, Brenna and his team searched for Eleven while investigating the newly opened gateway to the other dimension, informally known as the Upside Down. This culminated in an unsuccessful attempt to capture Eleven at Hawkins Middle School, which drew the attention of the monster. Brenna survived the monster's attack and sustained only minor injuries, but was unable to return Eleven to the lab. Following the events of November 1983, Brenna was outed as the lab's director and replaced by Dr. Sam Owens. The lab was shut down in 1984 and Brenna was falsely presumed deceased. In 1986, Brenna and Dr. Owens had established the Nina Project, situated at the top secret facility in the Nevada desert. The project was conceived in response to Eleven's losing across to her psychoclinic abilities and was designed to reactivate her powers via an experimental procedure. Brenner and Owens wished to use Eleven's ability to stave off the continued existent threat posed by the Upside Down. After some initial hesitation, Eleven participated and ultimately regained her abilities. Brenner sought to continue to experiment, wanting to push Eleven's abilities beyond their previous limit. Brenner and Owens began to argue when Eleven insisted on returning to Hawkins, which provoked by Brennan to forcefully incapacitate both Eleven and Owens. Shortly after this, the U.S. military arrived and commenced a full-scale attack on the facility. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Sullivan believed Eleven to be the root of the issue plaguing Hawkins and sought to eliminate her. Brenner was fatally wounded in the attack, but Eleven managed to escape unshattered, destroyed a military helicopter in the process. Brenner and Eleven exchanged some final words, and after she departed with her friends, Brenner finally consumed to his wounds, dying alone in the Nevada desert. I never liked Brenner. How can you do this to your wife and child? Although I don't appreciate the army what they wanted to do, they did kill a man with big ego and ambition. He will go over the backs of anyone what makes him a hated character among fans. Murray Bauman, a former investigative journalist for the Chicago Sun-Times. Bauman was hired by the Holland in 1984 to investigate their daughter's Barbara's disappearance the previous year. He concludes the events in Hawkins were evidence of a full-scale Russian invasion due to finding lead about a mysterious girl with a shaved head. The chief of Hawkins Police, Jim Hopper, continually dismissed Murray's attempts to convince him of the conspiracy. A friend of Barbara Holland's, Nancy Wheeler, went to Murray's home with Jonathan Byers, hoping to expose Hawkins' lab. They explained the prior year's event to Murray, including Barb's disappearance and the various ways in which the lab were involved. While the teenagers stayed over at Murray's. Murray poked fun at the pair, advising them to stop avoiding their feelings for each other. Murray later helped them release tapes containing an unwritten confession by Hawkins' lab director Dr. Sam Owens. The lab were forced to acknowledge their involvement with Bob's death, but claimed she died due to the chemical leak, a cover story that Murray persuaded Nancy and Jonathan to endorse. In July 1985, Chief Hopper and his friend Joyce Byers discovered that covert Soviet operation at Hess Farm, capturing a Russian scientist named Dr. Alexei in the process. Needing help to translate Alexei's speech, Hopper and Joyce begrudgingly turned to Murray for help, the nearest Russian speaking that Hopper knew of. Through Alexei, the Americans learned that Alexei and his compatriots had assembled a machine in a secret base deep beneath Starcourt Mall, a technology capable of praying open a new gate to the Upside Down. After Alexei was killed by Russian hitman Gregory, Murray assisted in infiltrated the hidden base, allowing Joyce and Hopper to disable the gate machine. Moments later, he and Joyce were found by a U.S. Army through Hopper apparently perished during his final skirmish with Gregory. When George received an anonymous package in March 1986, Murray helped her find a note hidden within the package, claiming Hopper was still alive. Murray soon joined Joyce on a rescue mission to break Hopper out of a prison camping in Kamchatka. Discovering he had been captured by the Russian after closing the gate on the Starcourt the previous year. Despite being double-crossed by smuggler pilot Yuri Ismailov, Murray and Joyce reached Kamchatka and successfully rescued Hopper in the process, indirectly killing the majority of the prison staff by setting the Russian Demogorgon free. Despite escaping to Yuri Ismailov warehouse in Kirskren, the group returned to the prison after learning Hopper and Joyce's children were imperiled by a new evil threatening Hawkins. They hoped that by destroying swirling particles they had witnessed at the base, a captured fragment of the Mind Flayer, they could deal damage to the upside-down hive mind and assist their friends in need. Returning to the prison, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray learned that gunfire shattered the tanks holding the Mind Flayer's fragment and numerous cryogenically frozen Demodogs, with the Mind Flayers reanimating the Demodogs. The Americans set out to kill the Demodogs and the Russian Demogorgon, fighting for their lives while hoping to inflict pain upon the hive mind. After some time, Hopper, Joyce, and Murray managed to execute all the creatures, with Dmitry, Anatov, and Yuri arriving by helicopter to take them back to America. You know, he's crazy, but he's a good crazy one. In the end, I liked him for who he was, and thank God he wasn't that sleazy as the what's his name, Yuri. So yeah, I think he is a crazy bastard who, in one way, still he's good, and he reminded me of some kind of a I don't want to say double agent, but he is an investigator that would go beyond, and you see that in this series. In October of 1984, Bob and Joyce were infatuated with each other, with Bob seeing a future with her and her sons by proposing moving out of Hawkins to start somewhere new. However, his plan was delayed when Joy's son Will began having memory issues and seizures related to a tunnel slowly growing in Hawkins. While tending to Will at the Hawkins Natural Laboratory, strange dog-like creatures from the tunnel began attacking the lab, trapping the buyers and others inside. Using his computer skills to turn off the security system, Bob helps Joyce and the others escape, but was unfortunately melted to death in front of her by one of the creatures. When Bob came in the second season to me, it was a little strange, but in the end, we see a good guy who is very good to Joyce and the boys, and he was joining in with the gang to defeat Vecna. Owens was a high-ranking member in the U.S. Department of Energy, tasked with containing the strange events that took place in Hawkins, Indiana, in 1983, replacing Dr. Martin Brenner as Director of Operations at Hawkins. In 1984, he oversaw the management and study of the Mothergate, but despite his best efforts, he was unable to stop the upside-down incursion or prevent the mind flayers from possessing real buyers. He oversaw a failed mission to destroy the Hawkins tunnel system, but refrained from attempting it again to the fact that Will would die if it was destroyed. Soon, adolescents, Demogorgon called demon dogs invade the lab. Owens guided Bob Newby as he tried to escape the lab following restoring its power. But Bob was molded and eaten by the Demodogs nevertheless. Later, Jim Hopper found Owens injured on a stairwell at the lab after Eleven uses her ability to seal the Mothergate. Hawkins' lab was shut down with the efforts of Murray Bauman, Nancy Wheeler, and Jonathan Byers, and Owens helped Jim Hopper in arranging the adoption of Eleven as his daughter. In 1985, Owens received a distress call from Hopper, informing him that the Soviet Union had infiltrated Hawkins and had established a base underneath the Starcourt Mall. Upon arrival, he observed the remainder of the gate produced by the Soviet machine called A-Key. Afterwards, he covered up the destruction of the mall, the Soviet gate, and several deaths by claiming the mall was destroyed in a fire. He was fired from an unspecified position in the military due to his failure to detect the invasion. That same year, Owens assisted by Byers' family and Eleven by relocating them to Lenora Hills, California. Upon learning that Eleven suffered a stroke and lost access to her abilities, Owens began working with Dr. Brenner on an experimental scheme called the Nina Project to rejuvenate them. In 1966, Owens and his Agent Alan Stinson, Agent Hammond, and Agent Wallace intercepted a vehicle carrying Eleven to prison after she assaulted her bully Angela. From there, he convinced Eleven to join him and he took her to the Ninja Project. When Eleven saw Dr. Brennan once again, she initially tried to escape. However, once again, Owens and Brenner convinced her to stay to get her powers back. After she fully re-experimented several memories of Hawkins' lab via the sensory deprivation tank and CCTV video clippings, Eleven regained her powers. Defying Dr. Brenner, Eleven wanted to leave the Ninja Project with Owens. However, Brenner incarcerated Owens and made 11 unconscious. Military Commander Lieutenant Colonel Jack Sullivan attacked the Ninja Project and found Owens. Dr. Brenner was killed by a sniper while 11 made a helicopter chase crash into the Ninja Project. Sullivan was seen emerging from the building, but it is unknown what happened to Owens. In the beginning, I liked him because he had a conscience, but what he did do to 11 was just wrong. So that changed a lot in my opinion of him. And the last thing we still need to discuss is the creators of the Upside Down world. The creatures of the Upside Down world. Vecna, a fearsome sentient creature aligned with the Upside Down. Vecna had humble origins as the human Henry Creel. After moving to a new home in Hawkins in March 1959, the young Henry discovered he had remarkable psychokinetic abilities and could alter the perception of others. Motivated by the misanthropic and nihilistic philosophy, Henry used his power to psychologically torture his family, eventually killing his mother and sister. After Henry's father, Victor, was falsely presumed to be the killer, Victor was imprisoned and driven further into madness. These events would draw the interest of Dr. Martin Brenner, who took Henry to Hawkins National Laboratory to be studied. He was designated as 001, becoming the laboratory's first child test subject. Brenner implanted a soteria into Henry's neck, a miniature device that suppressed his powers and apparently tracked his movements. In Henry's own world, he had become a prisoner. In time, Henry became one of several orderlies who assisted Brenner and attended the lab. Brenner would go on to replicate Henry's powers in 17 other child test subjects, who also had their movements and lives restricted to the lab's confines. In 1979, Henry tricked test subject 11 into removing the soteria chip with her powers. In a fit of rage, Henry used his restored power to brutally murder the other test subjects and workers and attempted to do the same to 11. However, 11 stood her ground and ultimately overpowered him, sending him through a gate to the Upside Down. There he gradually transformed into a being known as Vecna. He became explorer of the realm, discovering an exotic storm-like mass of particles, and used his powers to reconstitute it into a giant spider-like entity, a being that would come to be known as the Mind Flayer. In 1983, 11 accidentally opened a second non-temporary gate at Hawkins' lab by concentrating a creature known as the Demon Gorgon and Vecna, acting through the Mind Flayer, attempting to eradicate humanity both in 1984 and 1985. In 1984, he sent an army of adolescent Demogorgons to Hawkins and possessed a boy named Will Byers through the Mind Flayer. The following year, he made the Mind Flayer possess a group of humans and rodents and melt them down to create a proxy body. In both instances, 11 and her allies ultimately thwarted Vecna's plans by closing the gate from 1983, and then a gate opened by the Soviet Union in 1986. Vecna resurfaced, taking a more direct approach in his attempt to destroy humanity. He began murdering a host of Hawkins residents, tormenting his victims with his cursed power and using their deaths to open a series of new gates Dustin, Nancy, Max, and Ola began to investigate the murders, nicknamed the murderer Vecna after a challenge character from D&D. The group efforts to defeat Vecna culminated in a dual assault. 11 used psychic projection to confront Vecna within his own mind, while Nancy, Steve, and Robin traveled to the upside-down version of the Creel house to attack his real body. Despite heavily wounded him, the group could not stop Vecna from furthering his plans to annihilate both Hawkins and the wilder world. The Mind Flayer. A mysterious and then entity made up entirely of silver-black particles lived within the alternative dimension known as the Upside Down. This entity has many names, including the Shadow Monster, the Particles, and the Mind Flayer. The entity was gigantic, looming at least 50 stories tall, and sported a destinator spider-like appearance. The Mind Flayer exercised supreme control of the Upside Down via a psychic link, while with Demogorgons, vines, and Demobats forming a shared hive mind. For a period in 1985, possessed humans known as the Flayed also comprised part of the hive mind. In a sense, the entirety of the Upside Down was like a gigantic organism, with all its contents and agents mentally connected via the Mind Flayer. The entity was discovered by Henry Creel between 1979 and 1983, following Henry's banishment to the Upside Down. This version of the Mind Flayer was a storm-like mass of shadowy particles, or mist. It is not known if the mist possessed its own independent will, or consciousness, to it was certainly a living organism. Henry used his power to reconstruct the mist into a form that satisfied him, a giant spider-like entity with a flame-sharp head, not unlike a similar fantasy creature he had imagined as a child. Henry, also known as Vecna, first activity attempted to take over the world in 1984. Acting through the Mind Flayer, he possesses will, bias, and an army of adolescent Demogorgons or demon dogs. 11 interfered by closing the interdimensional gate previously opened at Hawkins' lab, serving the psychic link between the world and killing the demon dogs in the process. As 11 closed the gate, Will's friends and family worked to force a piece of the Mind Flayer out of his body, which in turn became dormant after the gate closure. The isolated piece of the Mind Flayer remains dormant at Brimborn Steel Work until 1985, when a newly opened gate re-established by psychic link to Vecna. Via this piece, Vecna began kidnapping and possessing multiple humans and rats, feeding them chemicals and melting their bodies. Interpolars of biomass. The biomass was then combined to create a proxy form through which Vecna could directly act in the human world. Like the Mind Flayer, his proxy form also resembled a spider and had the same flame-shaped head. However, this proxy form was rendered useless and inert after the new gate was shut, and the psychic link disabled once again. In the same time period, the Soviet Union somehow captured a portion of the Mind Flayer's particles and stored them in a military base in Kamchatka, along with adult Demogorgon and a number of cryogenically frozen demodogs. Hopper, Joyce, and Murray escape the base in March 1986, but return to destroy the Mind Flayer's particles, hoping to aid their allies in Hawkins by inflicting damage to the upside-down hive mind. However, upon their return, they discovered that the particles had escaped confinement and possessed the bodies of the frozen Demogorgons, freeing them. They were forced to change their plans, aiming to kill the Demogorgons instead, and doing so would also destroy fragments of the Mind Flayers and weak Vecnas in the process. The Demogorgon, also known as the Monsters, was a predatory humanoid creature that entered Hawkins, Indiana in November 1983. The creature originated from the parallel dimension known as the Upside Down. When 11 are child test subjects from Hawkins' natural laboratory with psychokinetic abilities made transdimensional contact with the creature, a gate between dimensions opened at the lab. The creature then set foot in Hawkins and began hunting, killing, and kidnapping various local townspeople. The friends and family of Will Byers, one of the Demogorgon's victims, slowly began to uncover the truth about the creature with the help of the escape of 11. The creature was finally defeated in the showdown with 11 at Hawkins Middle School. 11 used her abilities to disintegrate the creature, but accidentally transported herself to the upside down in the process. Well, the storyline of the Stranger Things is like follow. Stranger Things is set in the fictional rural town of Hawkins, Indiana, during the 1980s. The nearby Hawkins National Laboratory ostensibly performs scientific research for the United States Department of Energy, but secretly does experiments into the paranormal and supernatural, including those that involved human test subjects. And eventually, they have created a portal to an alternative dimension, the Upside Down. The influence of the Upside Down starts to affect the unknowing residents of Hawkins in calamitous ways. The first season begins in November 1983. Will Byers is abducted by a creature from the Upside Down. His mother Joyce, the town police chief Jim Hopper, and a group of volunteers search for him. A young psychokinetic girl named 11 escapes from the laboratory and is found by friends of Will. 11 befriends and assists them in their efforts to find Will. The second season is set a year later in October 1984. Will has been rescued, but he begins having premonitions of the fall of Hawkins caused by the creature in the Upside Down. When it is discovered that Will is still being possessed by an entity from the Upside Down, his friends and family learn that there is a larger threat to the world. Season 3. The third season is set several months later, in the days leading up to the 4th of July celebration in 1985. The new Starcourt Mall has become the center of attention for Hawkins residents, putting the majority of other local stores out of business due to the mall popularity. Hopper becomes increasingly concerned about 11 and Mike's relationships and becomes very protective of his daughter. Umbrick, known to the town, a secret Soviet laboratory underneath Starcourt Court, seeks to open the gateway to the Upside Down. Meanwhile, the Mind Flayer uses mind control to make Billy do his bidding. The fourth season is set several months later, in March 1986. Joyce, Will, 11, and Jonathan have moved to Lenora, California for a fresh start. In California, 11 struggles for the loss of her powers and being bullied in school. Meanwhile, in Hawkins, a being from the Upside Down, an entity later dubbed Vecna, begins killing the residents of Hawkins, opening new gates between the two worlds in the process. Planning to stop Vecna, Dr. Sam Owens takes Eleven to the facility to help her regain her powers. Similarly, Joyce and Murray fly to Russia to rescue Hopper from the Gulag in Kamchatka. Well, guys, I really love this series. It was unexpected because I was really skeptical in the beginning. And, well, how more I saw of it, how more I want to know what would happen. And my rating for this series is a 9. And you can bet yes or no. That's why I think Stranger Things is popular, because it has everything from both, and it's mysterious and I don't want to say creepy, but it is still, horror. And well, the rating of IMDb is 8.7. So it's a good series, and I think you guys tell me what you guys think of Stranger Things in the comment below. And well, dear listeners, thank you for listening, and join me in 2 weeks for a new episode of Orinda Talks. The next episode is about Riverdale, with a little bit of crossover of Sabrina, the Adventures of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, what I really like. You can listen, subscribe, and comment to Orinda Talks on the YouTube channel or join the Facebook group. I also like to tell you about my other podcast called Girls Talking Trek. Girls Talking Trek is a podcast hosted by 2 female trackers who will recap every 2 weeks an episode of Star Trek, starting with TNG. All the episodes will be recapped in chronically following. Girls Talking Trek is also to listen, follow, and subscribe on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app. Every 10th episode will be a video episode, so you guys can see us when we talk about the episode. We also have a YouTube channel and a Facebook group where you can comment on the episodes. I will see you in 2 weeks.